And it's going to take me back to the Zoom page. And while I wait for Zoom to figure it out,
okay.
I'm certain we are already live.
Cool.
My computer is just being, there we go, super slow. Hey, out there in Facebook land, got one person in, and then, all right, it's already recording. Nice. I like it when it's awesome. So, hi everybody, welcome to AcuPoints Black Acupuncture Meet and Greet, the show where you get to meet a different Black acupuncturist from all across the United States. I am your host, your friendly neighborhood pen lady, Dr. Tanisha Dandridge, and today I have the honor of having Dr. Chris Pearson with me. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we have a really exciting topic today. I can't wait to get into it, but first, let's hear a little bit more about you, Dr. Pearson. How long have you been practicing?
I've been practicing as a licensed acupuncturist since 2008. June was when I opened my first practice. Was a body worker before that. Started in the December of 1996. So I've been working within the TCM framework or way of arranging information, asking questions, that kind of thing since 96. So.
Awesome. And what got you into the healing modalities?
I think the initial interest sort of came from my background or my study in psychology. I was kind of, I wanted to help people, obviously. And I felt like the mind has a way of transforming lives in ways that other aspects don't. Started to study it academically and became a little disillusioned with the empirical model and the different approaches to psychological theory. So I was like, okay, there's got to be something going on in the body. So I decided to go to bodywork school. There I learned a little bit about somatic psychology and how we hold information in different parts of our body. So I was really inspired to study more and learn more. And I came away from that with a deep appreciation for the mind-body connection, but I didn't really have a modality yet. So I was exploring different modalities, and I was advised that I should check out academic study of religion. So yeah, so I studied religion academically. I was my minor, and I was just kind of searching how does man find his purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a young Black man raised in the church, there were some very clear messages being given to me about spirituality, but there weren't many modalities that were able to marry all three, mind, body, and spirit. So I was kind of searching for a way to express myself. I took a religion and healing class that exposed me to different healing modalities. And I was fascinated with the teacher. So I studied meditation with him and ended up doing some further study with him. And one of his students was my shiatsu teacher, who was also an acupuncturist. And I decided that that's the path I wanted to choose. It definitely wasn't like when I grew up, I want to be an acupuncturist. It was more of what's the appropriate medium for me to express myself in, and acupuncture was that.
And was that your first acupuncture experience too, with your shiatsu teacher?
No, I actually didn't get acupuncture from him. I got acupuncture from a spiritual guide. Outside of that, someone I met in my massage class, he was an acupuncturist in Singapore. And so he became a mentor to me in Tao cultivation. I received Tao from an initiating elder from Singapore. And my mentor, Ronnie, is the first person who ever gave me acupuncture. I don't think I ever actually got acupuncture from my shiatsu teacher. I just took his counsel.
Beans. And so where did you go to school for acupuncture?
I attended 3 separate schools. I went first to PCOM in San Diego.
Okay.
And my studies were, I was really searching for a guru. I was like, I need to find someone that I can pattern myself after. And I was one of 3 Black acupuncture students at the time, myself, Charles Hurst, and Carrie Winston. I believe Carrie Winston is also a member of the Black Acupuncturers Association. But we were the only 3 Black students in the school. And so it was, how can I say, it was kind of a disillusioning experience. There wasn't like a cultural void would be an understatement. San Diego is very vanilla, and the school didn't really lend itself well to mentoring young Black men. I was the only Black man there, so I did 4 semesters. I did well. Oh, hey, peace, Sarah. Um, Peace, Jonathan. So yeah, so I decided that I wanted to take some time away. I moved to Northern California, and in Northern California, I was a young father, young Black father, sort of cliched, living in my parents' basement, single, and I didn't want that. So I'm like, I'm gonna get a job. Once I get my job and I get my feet underneath me and I have a means of income, I'll see where I land. So I taught as a substitute teacher for some time, and it wasn't until I had a stable income and I realized that I didn't just need to make money, I needed to make a life, that I decided to go back to school. And so when my son was about, I want to say 3 or 4, I went back to school, started at ACCHS, Academy of Chinese Culture and Health Sciences in Oakland.
Ooh, that's where I teach.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Nice.
Yes, I was there 4 semesters. It was a good experience. I did, what can I say? There wasn't an exact alignment of semester units and credits. They don't make it easy for you to transfer because, you know, there are the 13 trimesters that you're required to take.
Mm-hmm.
So it's effectively like 3 1/3 years or something to that effect. Just depends on which system you're going through. So they said in order to sit for my year ends, I had to sit out for a semester, but they only offered Chinese the next semester. So I decided to transfer. So I attended 3 separate schools. I finished at AIMC in Berkeley. Yeah, so 4 semesters at 3 separate schools.
Not bad. You technically got done short.
Theoretically.
Time.
Yeah. At one point, I think I took 27 units.
Yeah.
I had a part-time job. I had a child and a child on the way. So yeah.
I am so happy that you made it through that. You know, one of the things that I really enjoy about doing the show is listening to everybody's origin stories and becoming an acupuncturist, and you know how long once we become acupuncturists, like we don't really go anywhere. Like, this is kind of where we stay. We stay in these healing modalities. And speaking of healing modalities, you know, listening to your story, I can imagine that your body has been affected by your life and that there have been some changes. And so that's today's topic, a TCM perspective on how bodies take the shape of life. And you've got quite a crowd, doctor, and I am excited
Awesome.
to hear some more about it. And I'm quite certain that our guests are really excited to hear some more about it. So go ahead and jump on in, Dr. Pearson.
Right on. I appreciate the introduction and also the inquiry. It allows me to be in my authentic narrative. And I think that that's the direction that the conversation will take. TCM perspective, bodies take the shape of life. That's sort of a generic catch-all. I was reading the Sue Wen a little bit today to sort of see if I could find source material to really line it up in TCM, because there's a lot of things that you develop over clinical practice in time that sort of become second nature, and you have to do your due diligence to study the classics to understand exactly where that thought form comes from, who had it before you, and to venerate and honor the tradition or lineage of consciousness. So that being said, I'm going to just start first with this concept of blood is the mother of Qi, Qi commands the blood. So it's my understanding that blood is formed by your breath, your food, your movement, your rest. And the patterning of these habits create the functionality of your organ systems. Your organ systems express themselves through your appendicular apparatus or through your arms and your legs, through your axial system, and create a life, right? So what I have found is that people, especially in clinical application, are very familiar with the concept of biomedical terms. So I'll sort of jump back and forth between those as I'm talking. And please keep me on time for your schedule. I have a tendency to meander in my dialogue, so
We do that here too. It's okay. I'll probably just jump in every now and then to explain concepts, as we have a very wide a very wide audience. Sometimes we have students, sometimes we have the everyday Dre, and sometimes we have
Okay.
acupuncturists. You never know who's online, and there are definitely some names here that I don't know. So hi everybody, and continue. Chi, blood, and the
Word.
body.
Okay. So um, I introduce the concept first when I'm talking with someone about muscle memory, right? And we sort of have this patterned or conditioned way of navigating the space-time continuum, navigating gravity. And so my auntie used to call it the winning formula. What's your winning formula? You generate a narrative that's authentic to the way that you navigate your life. It's not just your physical navigation, it's your navigation of relationships, it's your navigation of your spiritual journey. And I don't think that those are mutually exclusive concepts. So again, I'll sort of jump back and forth between those, and that's why I use the ambiguous title. The first thing is when we think about the shape of our bodies or the patterns of our movement, we have to think about how the organism or how the human takes in information. I see it as three primary ways. In TCM, they call it Jing Qi Shen, or essence, energy, spirit, or blood, Qi, Jing. I mean, there's a lot of reference to this number three. So I will lean on that three to make sense out of it in biomedical language. The first one is what I would call an electrical communication. The second is a chemical communication. And the third is a mechanical communication. And the systems that are governed there, we can say the electrical is the nervous system, the chemical is the hormonal system or the endocrine system, and the mechanical, I would say, is the cardiopulmonary system. So a combination of the heart and the lungs. And so it doesn't exactly line up with Zhang Fu, but it does have some similarities. So an organism takes in information. First, it comes through electrical because that's fast. Like you can feel something. If you overload a neurological sequence, you experience discomfort or pain. So nociception or pain receptivity is like the overloading of a neuronal system. Any stimulation of the nerve is going to have a chemical reaction or a hormonal response, whether it is a positive or a negative, a yin or a yang experience. So that will in turn regulate the cardiopulmonary system, which will shape the way that blood moves to an area. If I say, oh, that felt warm on my face, I'm sending blood there, right? If I'm shooting a basketball, there's a neurological sequence, there's a chemical reaction, and there's blood recruitment. So we use different tools. When we're young, it just depends on how far down the rabbit hole we go with this conversation. And I want to sort of plant the seed for people to ask questions later around the origins of movement. And I will only answer questions that are asked. I won't go into too much depth unless folks want more. But the long and the short of it is I start to look like the tools I use. So if there are tools that I employ regularly, for example, a computer, as we're all sheltering in place, dealing with this shared trauma of a shift from an analog experience into a digital experience, or from like a more visceral, I'm connecting with you, I'm talking to you, to now I'm like Max Headroom talking at you, right? So that what happens is we will protract our scapula, we will pronate our forearms, we will slightly elevate our scapula, and our respiratory function will change because we'll posteriorly tilt our pelvis. Our diaphragms will be slightly contracted. If we stare at the screen for long periods of time, then our eyes will strain, right? Because the blood is going elsewhere. And I start to look more and more like this, right?
In
So
other
my
words, you
body,
begin to hunch over and have bad posture. Mhm.
right. Well, it's not good or bad. I want to steer away from those concepts. It is the shape of my awareness.
Mhm.
Like I will look like the tool that I'm using, and the tool requires my chi, right? But I cultivate my blood, right? So if it looks a certain way, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So if I do these things, then my body will start to look like the thing I'm doing. If I'm a carpenter and I work with a specific drill, that repetitive stress movement will eventually cause the system to fail, right? Because my body will recruit a neurological sequence. We call it proprioception. Proprio meaning me, ception meaning awareness of. So like I know where I'm at in physical space. But what we don't pick up on, and what's really hard to pick up on the screen, is like where we're at in relationship, right? We like all of these cameras are off. So I have no sense of what's happening, right? And there is a sense of me losing myself in my own story, which happens for us all the time. But if our tools look a certain way, then our lives look a certain way, right? In the same way, if I am a person who's lifting something up, I'm going to have developed deltoids. I'm going to be doing a external rotation of my humeral head here. And so I will naturally have a well-developed shoulder and bicep because that's the shape of my work. As an acupuncturist, I want to make sure that my foundation is solid because I want to place the needle with clear intention. I want to be able to direct energy from heaven, from earth through me, right? Tien, Di, Ren, from heaven to earth to human transmission. And so what I have found is when we start to explore what it is that we see in real time, then that shapes the position of our sense organs, but it also shapes the position of our consciousness, right? So there are ways in which for example, everybody works on the computer, everybody's here on a computer. If my screen is off to my right, I'm going to have to activate the muscle that turns my head the other way, right? If this is slightly higher, then my keyboard's going to be up here, which means my body's going to start to look like my tool. So as a clinician or as an acupuncturist, my goal is not to judge what I see, is just to help someone to do a clear assessment of what is seen. What are you paying attention to? How are you actively engaging consciousness? Not with judgment, because it's not good and bad. It's just what you do. If you use a camera all the time, how do you hold the camera? You know, if you use a flute, how do you hold the flute? It's not good or bad, but if you do it enough, then your body will develop a neurological sequence it's just second nature. So sort of backing up,
kind of like the muscle memory. But yeah, these habits that we have in life can be advantageous for us, or they can begin to break the body down, particularly with repetition, as you were saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to break down relationship, right? If I do something over and over again, then it will have an effect. It'll either become enhanced or it will become diminished, right? So if I'm thinking about purely a skeletal muscular example, right? Then I send blood to a muscle that I want to use. When I send blood there, what comes with it? Activation of nutrition, right? The nutrition comes there and it causes the tissues to swell. And as the tissues swell, there's blood byproduct that comes with it. Often minerals or mineralization comes and creates sort of the bank. And if we go back to our TCM metaphor, we can say that the water carries with it the earth, right? And the earth is supposed to control the water.
Yeah.
So that sedimentation becomes the bank, right? It's like with a big rain, we throw down sandbags. Why? To keep the rain from coming in the stores, right? So we can draw upon the 5-element concept as metaphor. So what I would say is, as the blood begins to swell, you'll get micro tears, not from function, but from a shift in functionality. So as I begin to pay attention to something, if I repeatedly bring blood slowly into an area, then I don't injure myself. But if I get really excited, if my nervous stimulation is up, then I move quickly into an activity, I swell, and then I tell my connective tissue, hey, I'm going to act on you. And the displacement of force that happens on that connective tissue can either harm the tissue or it can do it harmoniously, right? So with athletes who are at a peak performance, or with computer jockeys that are at a peak performance, there is a, how can I say, a normalized amount of stress on those tissues. And the more the electrical stimulation is given, the more you're going to get a chemical response or a hormonal response, and therefore cardiopulmonary reaction. So as a result, in order to accommodate the change in shape of the muscle, right, as it swells, you have to lay down harder tissue. So that blood byproduct comes in and it creates what we would call calcification or fibrosis, fibrotic adhesions, right? But these are strengthening mechanisms to deal with increased leverage, increased force, increased torque, right?
Yep.
Say I stop working out. And people do, because sometimes the rains come and sometimes they go. But the banks don't change. The tendons don't change. The ligaments don't change. They are rated for your peak performance. So it doesn't matter if it's a trickle of water, the stones aren't moving, the soil isn't moving. So what I have found is that also happens in our relationships, right? It's not just the physical being. Like if I do it this one way, if I swell into your life and I'm here, right? Just like rainwater's coming in, they can wash away the banks. They can eliminate the boundaries. They can make you poop soft, right? Like spleens being damaged because the kidney energy is so strong in that moment, right? Or in the form of losing essence. Yeah, we have this tendency to be overly expressive. And then it damages the way that we hold relationships. So it's interesting to me to use nature as sort of the metaphor for the shape of life, because we are ultimately microcosms. We're walking ocean, right? So everything comes into us, expresses itself through us, and our bodies look like what we do.
Indeed, right? Runners have a different shape from football players, who have ballerinas, who definitely have a different shape from computer jockeys, as many of us have turned into. And so
Absolutely.
that you spoke about that I think it would be important to go a little more in depth to, especially because so many people have had to change their lives so suddenly and so drastically in 2020, is you mentioned that the body doesn't go back. And I think that people might have a hard time with that. The body doesn't go back once it's been conditioned into a particular performance. That doesn't mean that the body can't grow into a new performance, but those changes that have happened, the changes that have occurred in the body, they don't just immediately erase, like they're there. And it can become detrimental, particularly if you're not using them the way many of us have been forced to change our lives quite suddenly. Could you speak on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to refer back to a source text really quickly because I think it's important. The source text for all acupuncture is the Huang Di Ne Jing. So Yellow Emperor, right? The classic on internal medicine, the Huang Di Ne Jing. There are two parts. There is the Su Wen, the simple questions, and then there is the Ling Shu, the divine pivot. So at the very beginning, there is the Su Wen, and they talk about this concept of the Jing. We talk about it as the Jing Mai, or the pathways. But Jing, as those of us who've studied the medicine understand, that characters aren't words. Words aren't characters. Characters are concepts. They're living symbols. And so in the Su Wen, they talk about passing through and the main supporting structure as being the definitions for the Jing. So that suggests that simultaneously we are form and function, right? Something that is passing through and also something that is the main supporting structure. Then it goes further in that, I believe it's the second chapter, where they introduce the concept of mu and shu, right? And not the awesome little plum sauce wraps that you get, not the mushu, but like the place where, okay, I want to start at the beginning really quickly. Yin and yang coalesce, they come together, life is born, right? In that moment, the celestial energies from the cosmos enter into either side of the spine, And that's when these little buds of organs are formed, right? And this is what we call the transporting points or the shoe points. Back shoe points are what students refer to them as. And that's when the energy begins to form inside of the organs and they coalesce bilateral to the spine. And so these little buds that start off as postsynaptic ganglion actually form out into nerves by way of the Hun or the spreading of the liver qi, right? And they wrap around to the front. And it's like the alarm is going off, ding, 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 ding. They used to call the front mood points the alarm points. But at the same time, they call them the collection points. So the shoe points are transformative points or transporting points, and the mood points are collecting points or alarm points. And so we are both simultaneously structure and function. So like, yes, our lives have changed, but we have the ability to pivot from problem to possibility. We are not fixed. We are not stuck. We have capacity to transform. And so, yes, our lives look different, but there's a Buddhist saying that I'm reminded of, better not to start, but if you start, better finish. So there's this idea of like, if I'm going to do it, like if I'm going to live my life in this way, this is my commitment. And in that commitment, I have an awareness principle. I call it like, I got this great curriculum from the Flourish Agenda. It's an amazing Black organization that helps healing intergenerational trauma. They have this thing called the karma model. I'll just briefly say culture, agency, relationships, meaning, and aspiration. And so healing-centered engagement moves you through that sequence. So what they said is there's the ABCs of manifestation. The ABCs of manifestation talk about first awareness. Awareness supported by B, belief. Belief supported by C, creativity or commitment, and then D, discipline. So you could move through the alphabet and you could assign meaning to all of these things. But the point is, I can't have the ability to manifest my life if I don't first start with my awareness. So if I want a healthy life, I can't focus on the problem. I can't focus on the fear. I can't focus on all of the mass messages that are being reinforced through our shared trauma. What I can focus on is what I'm paying attention to. And in this moment, I feel myself sitting in this chair. I feel my nervous system, right, ticked up because I see familiar faces. I'm engaged in a material that I'm inspired by. I'm surrounded by people that I'm inspired by. So my speech pattern is picking up. Like I'm aware that these things are happening in real time. Most people feel afflicted by what they feel instead of embodied in what they are actually feeling. And so what happens for us is we like to externalize, right? It can't be me, it's this situation. It's that I'm typing. It's that it's COVID. It's that I have to pivot, right? Not I'm feeling, because I am powerless in externalities, but I am powerful in my internal process. Ultimately powerful.
The United States does not do a good job in embracing the idea of feelings. We are way too busy oftentimes to be called into centering ourselves and being honest, for that matter, with what we feel. We walk around with so many distractions that we are not typically aware of what's happening inside of our bodies. And so it's really hard to follow that process of that electrical process, that chemical process, and then finally that
Cardiopulmonary.
cardiopulmonary, I was going to say musculoskeletal, finally that
Yeah.
process. But you know, when you realize that that is how the body functions, and that that proprioception or that neuroception, when those things begin to happen and you know that that is a part of your life, it helps you to slow down. And that's where meditation is really wonderful. It helps you to slow the mind down so that you can become with your feelings and understanding what is happening. That's the cool thing about COVID for those of us who've been able to take a breath, right?
I
And so
love it. I love it.
man, I have to say that I cannot call up that same frantic amount of energy that I had pre.
Nor should you.
And you know what? I also realized that I don't want to. I don't want to be able to call up that frantic amount of energy that was necessary for me to get through my day-to-day process. I enjoy being able to embody the turtle and being able to be centered within myself. This has been
Yes.
an awesome conversation. I'm really enjoying it. And
Right on, me too.
continue.
Okay. So I wanted to speak to the idea of presencing oneself at a particular moment and the vehicles of self-expression that we choose. I'm going to use the framework of yin and yang again, right? We have two primary narratives, right? Yin and yang. We have the emotive narrative and we have the communicative narrative, right? And so babies very early on determine how they can manage their experience with their emotions. So they're not concerned with who's watching the movie or who's trying to get a paper written or who's like, working on some music. I'm wet. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. Like, and this outward pouring of yang energy, right? It's just out. There's no reflective. And I think that is very much the United States. Like we are a child that feels entitled, that just wants to take like, I'm hungry, give me that. I need to pee, I need to poop. Like these very basic things, like that's my shit, right? I'm not worried about yours. I need it for me. So what if it hurts you? Now there's a second narrative that develops when I start to realize that when you smile in response to something I've said, it makes me feel good, right? It's like a reciprocal smile. And so I call this the communicative narrative. And this is one that's not very evolved. It's not to say that any nation has this evolved, because I think that's sort of a false flag. I'll go back to that in a minute. The idea of being able to be understood, right? Like to be able to really be heard has very little to do with how I feel. And sometimes I got to put my feelings to the side if I really want you to feel me. Feel me?
I feel you.
So there's like, if I really want to get down to what it is, like if we really go in there, then I need to actually listen to how you listen. Do you listen through like words? Do you listen to my body? Do you listen with your emotions? Do you listen with further questions? Like, what is it that you're looking for to be able to actually hear me? And that part takes a lifetime to evolve. And the beauty of it is the most proximal relationships we have, first and foremost, is with our corpus, with our body. There is instant feedback. If I am emotive, I get instant feedback. If I'm communicative, I get instant feedback. Now, should you be fortunate enough to share physical proximity with another human in this time, I know it's rarefied air and not everybody got somebody to build with, but if you do you want them to like feel what you're feeling, or do you want them to understand what you're thinking? So you kind of have to understand what your relationship looks like. Are you the self-important, self-absorbed child, or are you the higher order thinking communicator, which is of yin, right? And we're not going to ascribe gender to yin and yang, but those sound very similar to man first, woman second in the aforementioned, right? Like I'm guilty. I am the first one that like I can sometimes be the second one, but let's just be clear. I've been socialized in a very specific kind of way as a Black man to like not care about feelings other than my own. Like they're only mine. And I don't yeah, I get you got feelings, but you know, that's a longer conversation for another time.
I still think it's really a very dominantly United States in particular, having had the benefit of living in a couple of other places, like that me, I'm first, my feelings, and or don't have feelings. Like I really hate that spiritual bypassing that happens where you're not supposed to have feelings other than rage or contentment. Is definitely kind of a byproduct of living here in the United States, gaslighting ourselves into thinking that we don't have feelings, or that feelings have a negative or positive association. A feeling really is a chemical reaction. It is a chemical reaction happening inside of your body in response to a stimuli. And so
yes.
when you take away that binary of good and bad, right? And I'm definitely an offender with using the goods and the bads, right? When you take away that binary of good and bad, and you simply acknowledge that this is a chemical reaction to a stimuli, and therefore it is probably a totally reasonable association to have. And so being able to be honest with our emotions, being able to feel our emotions, and being able to process our emotions is not something that we really think about in the United States. And it's not something that we're really taught how to do.
Well, I just want to push back a little bit. I think anytime we get too seated in a geopolitical concept or in the concept of identification with externalities, we can kind of lose, we can lose or jump the shark, right? So I was walking with my brother Nez this morning, and he and I were talking about the nature of inquiry, right? So my brother Nez he is probably one of the most sincere human beings I've ever spent time with, but he's not formally educated. But he's probably brighter than most people that I deal with who are highly educated, right? So we're having a conversation about, okay, well, what is science? Science is the art of inquiry, tested hypothesis, right? So I ask a question. Then after I ask the question, I come up with what I think, a hypothetical response to said question. Then I test my theory, my hypothesis, with research and data. And these are quantitative analytics. These aren't things that I feel about. It's just like, what's happening? When's it happening? And so we were having this conversation, and I said, what's the most important question you could ask? He's like, I don't know. I said, well, I've given this a lot of thought, and I'm gonna just share it with y'all right now, because neurologically, our mouth makes a very similar shape with all of the inquiries. Who, what, when, where, why, how, right? There's a circle in our mouth every time, or the spleen and stomach, and the heart cuts the air, right? The flower of the heart is the tongue, right? It gives life to spirit. So I said, in our culture, we're taught that who is the most important thing, right? Who I am. So we look at the circle. The circle in many spiritual traditions refers to the unbroken whole, or the divine, right? And so if it's at the end of the grapheme, it's the afterthought. The identification is me and then divinity, because who is WHO, not to be confused with the World Health Organization. But when I take those same letters and I reorganize those letters and reorganize the priorities, and I put the unbroken whole in the middle, what do I have? How? So it doesn't matter to me who you are, it's how you treat me. So how I live is more important than who I am, when I'm living, where I'm living, why I'm living, like what I'm doing. All of those inquiries are in some cases like they're a moot point. So Nez, born in the US, raised as a Black man in the US, grew up in the Pentecostal church. How he is with me is so sincere and so present. Like, is he not American? Because he here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, how over who all day. So like, how I move through the world defines my life. And I don't just mean like in relationship, I mean, do I do external rotation of my humeral heads to engage the small muscles that position the humerus in a way that allows my respiratory capacity? And if blood is a connective tissue and it's constantly moving, carrying nutrition, then literally the shape of my body is the shape of my organ function and the shape of my life. And my heart can only be open to you if I open my heart. Right? So like, how do I use my posterior motor chain to move me forward, get my ass in gear? Right? I literally have to engage my hamstrings and my glutes to get my ass in gear, or to put some backbone in it, right? Or like take a deep breath because I'm getting excited. So, you know, there's a way in which like the self-reflective process can shape anything. And whether you use meditation, or I have needles that I place in very specific locations in your skeletal muscular apparatus, or we go back to the first quote, blood is the mother of chi, chi commands the blood. Oh, that's in my blood. That's my blood relative. Ned's not my blood relative, he's my spirit relative, right? So, but my blood is my DNA, right? And so that shaping, blood is the mother of chi, chi commands the blood, that shaping, that calling is formed by my breath, my food, my movement, my rest.
Ashe. Definitely.
So ancestors walk with me, right? Like literally I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm here in this moment because of the sacrifices of those that came before me, whether it was the kale and cabbage and legumes that I brought into my body, right? Turned into compost and then gave life. But you know, there's nothing new under the sun. We're just recycling energy.
Absolutely.
That's all it is.
Indeed, indeed. All right.
And word.
We are moving towards the end of the show, but I, by all means, want you to continue speaking. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or hi there on Facebook land. Sorry, I haven't looked down in a while. I've been a little engaged. If you have any questions, type them out out in the Facebook chat, and I will answer them there. For all of those who have joined us today on Zoom, thank you for coming. You can type your questions out into the chat, and I have to say that everyone has enjoyed your talk immensely, myself included. So continuing on with the same vein, what other little jewels would you like to leave the audience with before we leave off for the evening?
Okay. Wow.
I know there's so many to pick from.
Yeah, well, I think first, let me say it's presumptuous to assume that everyone's having the experience you're having, but I'm gonna rock with it because it felt good.
No, I'm reading comments. I am reading comments. People are enjoying you.
I'm feeling that, but like I want to believe that on some deep level, I am another yourself, or in Lakesh. So I'm here as a representation of you. I've just chosen to study this stuff. You've chosen to study some other stuff. So I like to believe we got the same feeling, but I'm not going to make any assumptions because I'm not reading that. But what I do want to read is this piece right here. It's from the Suwen, chapter 1, 174. It says, they made every effort to achieve peaceful relaxation, and they considered self-realization as success. Their physical body did not deteriorate, and their essence and their spirit did not dissipate. They too could reach a number of 100. So I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. It doesn't mean the physical age 100 to self-realize. But to live to 100, you must be self-realized. And you have to have habits that engender healthy blood production, healthy distribution of chi, and healthy connections with people around you, healthy connections with your environment.
That is definitely important. Acupuncture, meditation, breathing, drumming, dancing, good food, deep breaths, all of these things help to engender healthy chi and healthy.
Oh yeah.
So that's an exclusive list. That's just some.
So do hugs. So do meaningful conversations.
Is important, man. Touch and human interaction is so important, and I think that's why the pandemic fatigue is so draining on the spirit. Right? We're not getting those hugs. We're not getting that external communication with other bodies. And we are definitely a herd animal, so to speak. We need to be around other people. It helps us with our neurological, psychological, and spiritual balance. And a lot of people are missing that, particularly those that don't have a quarantine pod or a quarantine circle. So,
Yes, yes. I feel a deep empathy for that, but I'm a scientist first, and I like to believe that I've never met anyone who's not dead or not gonna die, but how you live is your life. And if you choose to live in fear, that's the choice you make. I have been hugging people in a safe way. I have been very intentional about where I position my face, but that don't mean I can't be close to you. I don't need to close talk you. I don't need to breathe in your face, but I can put my head behind your back and I can hold you, because that has value. And I really feel like standard temperature and pressure and volume. Gas expands to fill the space. There's only so much particulate matter that I can give off in an outside space. If I'm outside with you, fucking hold me. Like, be close to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, let go of all the pretense. Like, we need that more than anything. So, like, I hear you. I'm not saying walk up and hug a stranger, especially if they're coughing and sneezing, but I'm saying find somebody that you can connect with, because that's the only thing that's going to help you through this. Because the isolation, that ain't it.
it's not, and it's rough. It is definitely rough. I am going to maintain my overly cautious stance.
It's all good. It's all good.
I'm not going to be in crowded spaces, but I do have a couple of people that I allow in for hugs. And I definitely have my pod people that I share my air with so that I can get my biological communication on for my own psychological well-being. And, it's the same thing for my kid. But I know that not all people can do that. And for some people, that's simply not a safe option, particularly if you're immunocompromised.
Yes.
That's just not always an option. So for those of you who can, please make sure you get a hug on. That's really important. Sorry, I'm looking out for comments here. Some of them are beginning to come through on Facebook. If you
good.
And by all means, get a hug in. And if you can get somewhere outside where it is safe to see a smile, you should, because it does have an impact on the way that your brain chemistry works. Like we need human interaction, and the pandemic is definitely taking its toll on a lot of people because of the lack thereof. All right. So I'm still watching and waiting for questions, including from our audience members. I don't know if anybody wants to put their hand up and ask a question of Dr. Pearson or myself. Feel free to let us know that you have one. And in the meantime, and in between time, I'm going to let Dr. Pearson continue.
Oh, all right. Free mic. Okay. Well, first, I'm not a doctor.
Right? We just want to hear what you have to say. We don't opportunity to just listen to an acupuncturist for the hell of it, right? We have to go into the office, and it's something very specific only to ourselves. And so the point of the show is allowing people to have the space to be able to interact with an acupuncturist, particularly one from the African American community.
Word. Okay, so to that end, let me first say I'm not a doctor. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I've not fulfilled my credentials to receive the title of Oriental Medical Doctor, and I would be remiss if I had titled myself otherwise. As a Black acupuncturist,
I gave you that title. My bad.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. As a Black acupuncturist.
As a Black acupuncturist.
Yes, as a Black acupuncturist, having just watched Between the World and Me, there's a very real narrative that I must work to rewrite. I reject the myth of Black criminality. I reject the myth of Black hypersexuality. I reject the myth of Black insensitivity or Black male emotional unavailability. All of that is bullshit. It's a false narrative. So I put that out there just off top, because every brother I know feels deeply. Every brother, I see you, Brother Calvin. I know you. I feel your heart. I feel your spirit. It's like there's so much that we have to contend with on a daily basis. I think I saw something come through on the chat. If I had 60 seconds to convince a Black person how to get acupuncture, I would say, or to get acupuncture, I would say, whatever it is that's going on in your life that is causing you discomfort, stop doing it. If you can't stop doing it, ask for some help. If you want something that can affect your life and change it forever, acupuncture ain't it. But if you want help to focus on things that you can change in a process, come get some acupuncture.
I like that. I like that completely, totally, and deeply.
Oh, hold up. Was that Crutch?
That was Crutch.
Crutch in the building. Man, the do-rag's so tight, I could see the vein popping.
I think
I love it.
That is wonderful. You know, if I had 60 seconds to persuade a Black teenager from Oakland on the importance of acupuncture, what would I say? I would say that all the things that we do in our life as crutches, whether it's alcohol or cannabis or zoning out in front of the TV, acupuncture is simply a way of being able to readjust the body into a place of peace and relaxation. You don't necessarily have to have anything wrong, but if you want to be wrong for a long period of time, then acupuncture will be able to help you with that, along with whatever else it is that comes up along the way. That was
how does it work? How does it work?
How does it work?
Yeah, well, how does it work?
I'm a jokester, and I like to tell people a lot of insane things to help alleviate their fears behind acupuncture, because iatrophobia, in particular in the African American community, is a thing. And so I tell people that I'm a magic potion slinger or the wielder of tiny magic wands, and that, I provide pins. But if we're asking the question of how does acupuncture work, you place an acupuncture needle within the body and it creates a place where you can have this neurochemical bioelectrical change that works directly with your brain. There's a longer story that goes into that. And so as you are our guest speaker, I would love to hear what you tell people about how acupuncture works.
I would say the placement of a needle conducts an electrical current from me to you. It lowers the electrochemical, say again?
Nope, continue.
Okay. It lowers the resistance at a nerve site and stimulates the peripheral nerve. That nerve then conducts a communication to the postsynaptic ganglion, or the beginnings of your peripheral nervous system, and then communicates with your central nervous system. It's doing this at light speed. Then there is a hormonal reaction. You stimulate the brain, the hypothalamus goes off, you send a flood of chemicals into the bloodstream. The body says, oh, there is something in my arm, or there's something where this needle is placed. Let me send some blood there. And with that blood, I will decipher if this is something that is poisonous that I need to eradicate, or if there's damage to tissue. So I place a needle, I stimulate your nervous system, that stimulates your hormone system. Then ultimately the blood that flows there is your cardiopulmonary response. So your heart sends a message to the area. We want to bring awareness here. And so I like to say that because the myofascial matrix is a crystalline structure of minerals, the moment that you place something, you affect everything. So the moment that a needle goes into someone, like if I was to take a cadaver and to resect from my finger, I could peel back the layers of flesh and reach any one of my organs. Just depends on where my intention was, because chi follows intention. In the same way, so too does a myofascial matrix. I can peel back layers and I can reach any part of a person with a single placement of a needle. So I had a teacher tell me, right channel, wrong point, doesn't matter. Because it's your intention. Chi follows the intention. So I believe through the myofascial matrix, I can touch your spirit with a single needle. So if you want to change, I could touch you, right? I could reach you. But if you want to change, you have to reach you. I have to be an extension of you. You know, I've been reflecting on this concept a lot, and that is all beings are motivated by self-importance. without exception. All sentient beings, all beings that have consciousness are motivated by self-importance. Simple ones begin and end at their flesh. More complex ones begin and end in their families, right? Slightly enlightened ones begin in their community, right? Those who've done some cultivation begin to see themselves in an expressed state of humanity. Those who've studied a little bit more see themselves in all sentient beings. Those who've ascended, who really get it, see all of the ever expanding, infinitely expanding universe as an expression of singular consciousness. And I am that I am. I am you. There's nothing that I could say to you that you didn't already know, because it wouldn't make sense.
I love that. That is amazing. When people ask me about how is it that intentions can create so much change in the world or in the body, I like to remind people of the observer experiment, where simply the act of consciousness, simply the act of observing the movement of electrons initiates a change in the way that those electrons behave. And we know that from science. If you've never looked into the observer experiment, I highly recommend it. It's super cool. The short version is they shot some electrons through a screen, and if nobody was looking, including a camera, the electrons behave in one fashion. And if anybody is watching the experiment, including a camera, it immediately changed the shapes that the electrons would make on the other side where they were shooting them out from. And so intention is—
They would line up.
They would line up, right?
They would line up. The moment that you watch them, they would line up.
Right. So your intentions, and
so you better act right.
You better act right, right?
Right.
So going back to the beginning of your conversation, when you were saying, it's like, where are you putting your intentions? Where are you putting your focus? How are you living your life? What are you doing? That intentions, that consciousness really does make a difference in your body and your life, and the way that your electrons are actually flowing in and about you and through your extended consciousness, whether that consciousness stops at your skin, if it goes through your viscera, if it's about your family, your community, the world at large, or the universe in which we are a part. Intentions are absolutely important, even more so than necessarily the right words or the wrong words. Knowing what it is that you're really trying to get to and what you're trying to affect, how, so to speak, is truly important.
Yes, 100%. I want to just, I know we're running out of time, but I want to just acknowledge, I am deeply humbled by the presence of one of my previous clinic supervisors. She is an ally. She is an embodied wisdom and a transformative spirit. So I just want to thank Christy for coming out.
I knew it was going to be Christy Holmes. I could just look at her. It's like it's her.
Yeah, she's got that presence. So there's a deep appreciation that I have for this concept of intention. And one of the things that I learned while in clinic was it don't matter what you got on. It matters how you interact with people. She was one of the people who never talked to me about my Malcolm X shirt. She never talked to me about what I look like. She would always just ask me, okay, well, what's your intention? I would have a point prescription. She'd be like, that's interesting. Well, let's see how that goes. She was never like, no, you got to do it this way. She was very clear that my intention was to guide the experience because I was sharing it. So like with that, as we're learning, as we're students, should we be so fortunate as to have someone who really teaches you to trust yourself and really trust what your intention is to guide your attention, and your attention to guide your behavior. So you can't shift what you pay attention to or shift your behavior if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. Furthermore, if you don't know how you're doing what you're doing. So how over who all day. Appreciate you.
All right, guys. So as we close up here at 6 o'clock, I just like to remind everybody that one of the organizations that I'm part of is the Black Acupuncture Association, which got its start this year. Is a national organization. It's a collection of Black acupuncturists across the country. If you know of a Black acupuncturist and you don't see them listed at the acupuncturist.com. Please make sure that you share the website. If you're looking for a melanated acupuncturist, that is a great place to start. One of the things that we have on our website are melanated ear seeds or brown tape ear seeds, which is important for the African American community because otherwise we don't have things that look like us. Normally I have the ugly one sitting over here, but I don't today because I cleaned off my table. Right, and ear seeds are a wonderful way of being able to get some acupressure to kind of help out with that neuroception and those chemical reactions that are happening inside of the body, because the reality of it is there is stress. And for the layperson, hey, there we go. We will be selling small bags that, right, you see all 3 different colors there, kind of sort of minus the glare right there. We'll be selling small bags that people will be able to take home with them. There's an insert on the inside so that people will be able to begin to use ear seeds as a part of their everyday wellness. So please stop on by the blackacupuncturist.com website. You'll see the small packs up beginning tomorrow, and the larger packs for clinicians are already available. And if you're looking for something a little more shiny, you can swing by Everyone's Place, which is my website, and you will find things like this, which are the rainbow colored crystal ear seeds, along with a variety of other wellness tools. So I want to thank you again, not Dr. Chris Pearson.
LAC.
You know, this whole time, I don't know, it was just really stuck in my head that you were Dr. Pearson. So I guess I'm manifesting the future for you if you ever wanted to.
I appreciate that, but I have that presence.
You got what?
I said I have that presence.
You do. You have that presence. Right. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad that you came on to join us today. You guys be sure to join us next week. We're going to have Black Pearl Acupuncture. I need to go check my schedule. We're going to have, I think it is Black Pearl Acupuncture joining us next week. And I'm terribly, terribly looking forward to it. Thank you again to all of the guests. If there are no further questions for not Dr. Chris Pearson, LA. Come on, GCOM ain't that far away. It's all online these days. Then thank you again for joining us, not Dr. Pearson, if you can hold on and not hang up. Bye, everyone.
Peace, y'all. Love, power, peace.
Stop the recording. Stop the Facebook Live.